Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. Here we are with episode 103 of Behind the Camera. As always, before we get into today's show, if you would like to follow Behind the Camera across social media, you can find my link tree in the description, which will take you to Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and also has the link to where you can buy my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. This is available in both paperback and ebook, and is free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited. If you would like to see more of the behind the scenes side of the podcast, you can also support the show on Patreon. For £3 a month, you'll get access to extra content, including a Patreon exclusive series, your name added to the wall of patrons at the end of every episode of Behind the Camera, and much more. But now, getting into today's topic. After I had 100 episodes of Behind the Camera, something that I really wanted to do was add in more episodes per week, but sort of integrate some new themes into the show. So as you guys know, every Sunday I'll do an interview with somebody, and that's great. That's something I've done from day one. It's something I want to continue doing. That's the bread and butter of Behind the Camera. But obviously in recent months, I have really kind of undertaken this theme of lessons learned and the journey and everything, especially with my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. Podcasting has been such a life-changing thing for me that I want to help as many people as I possibly can who might want to get into podcasting, who might have started podcasting, but they're not sure where they're going. Like, by no means am I an expert, but I would love to sort of use my experience to sort of help others in that sense. And that's kind of what I want to do with these additional episodes that I'm doing. I'm going to have a lot more solo episodes where I'm talking about certain things that I've learned. There is the potential I can have guests on to talk about these different topics, but the way it's going to work is I'm going to have my interviews on a Sunday, and then on Wednesdays, I'm going to have something a little bit more topical just to talk about, to really kind of break down the walls of what podcasting really is and what goes into podcasting. So that kind of brings me neatly onto the topic of things that I wish I knew before starting a podcast. And believe me, there are a lot of things. And I guess these are things that I kind of really have learned over time, that even today I'm still learning things podcasting, to the point where I'm like, man, I wish I really knew this earlier. I wish I knew this right from the beginning. But I am, at the same time, I'm glad I didn't, because I think it's very important that you are constantly learning. You're constantly looking to develop and just improve on what it is that you're doing. Even if it is fantastic, I think there's always a way that you can improve on it to live up to the potential that is there. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. But yeah, I think that kind of really explains the first point, is that you don't need to have everything figured out. And that's something that I think I overplanned. When I first started doing Behind the Camera, I think I overplanned. I think I wanted to have everything figured out in terms of doing my episodes, what the episodes were going to consist of, and getting them out on a particular day of the week. That was always the plan. I had that figured out, and that was fine. And the format of the show has always been fine, but I guess I wasn't as strong as an interviewer as I am today. To the point where whenever I was interviewing my old guests, right from the very start, for the first 20 episodes plus, I would have had the questions I was going to ask written out in prose right in front of me, and I would have read off them as I was having the conversations. But the problem with that is the episodes, if you look back, you'll see that some of my episodes were over an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I kind of feel like I was bringing the conversations back in line with the question and a little bit more than I absolutely needed to. And I kind of always thought that, if it's an interview, you're going to have particular questions, because when it gets to the point where you're on a bit of a tangent, or you're just, the question's kind of gone, you're talking about something else, then I felt like at the start that was taken away from it. But I was so wrong. I was honestly so wrong, because I've learned now that I don't need to have full blown questions prepared in advance. Of course, it's fine. Like, the way I do things now in comparison to before is I will have a handful of bullet points with a couple of words on them of just talking points, and I can formulate a question around that, and then I just let the conversation flow. Even today, I don't necessarily have every single episode figured out. I will do my research, but in doing so, it can sometimes get to the point where you over research, which is always better than under researching. I can guarantee you that. But sometimes you can over research and you find yourself thinking, oh my God, there's far too much here for me to talk about this, that, and the other. But just pick a few of the highlights. And if you don't get to all of them, then that's fine. If you have an hour-long conversation with somebody and you've only covered a couple of points out of, like, say, like, you've written down five talking points, and you get to two of them, well, how was the conversation? Was the conversation really, really good? Did you need to move on to those other things? Would you like to have spoken about them? Maybe so. I can say for sure that I have had so many conversations with people to the point where I didn't get to bring up certain things that I really wanted to, but that's okay. The conversations were still great. I really enjoyed them. I felt like there was a lot of impact personally on me, even if I didn't necessarily have it all figured out. And it's really good to go back to the sort of the bare bones of podcasting. When you're starting out, you're gonna have nerves. You're gonna have a basic setup. You're gonna be uncertain about what it is. You're still finding your voice. You're not gonna have everything figured out, and like everything I've just said there, that still kind of is proven over 100 episodes in. You're not necessarily gonna have everything figured out, but you get to that point, in some aspects, you just get to that point by doing. Do I have everything figured out still with Behind the Camera today? No. Is Behind the Camera something I'm incredibly happy with? Absolutely. I'm incredibly happy and proud with what I'm doing, but I know I don't have everything figured out. I know I'm that much of an ideas person that there's so much that I want to do with it that I just don't feel like I have the mental capacity to even formulate into a sentence. But that's fine. I'm just taking it bit by bit, figuring things out as I go along. You'll have some things figured out when you begin. Not everything. You don't need to have everything. Podcasting is and should be a long game. And in that game, you figure things out as you go. By practice, by doing, just by getting behind the mic. Getting behind the mic, talking, finding your voice. That's really how you figure things out. But you won't necessarily have that right from the beginning. And I touched on this as well. When you over prepare conversations, that's something that I did. I over prepared conversations, and my earlier episodes were a bit more rigid. You can go back and listen to them. I think they were fine for what they were at the time, for how long I was in podcasting. I think it was fine. But in comparison now, I go back, I listen to my old episodes, and I think everybody should go back and listen to a couple of their old episodes every so often, just to really it kind of reminds you how far you've come, but also it kind of really reminds you as well of the differences that you've made that you probably needed to make, and just shows you that you have learned. So I think it's a good exercise to go back. But I kind of, as a host, I felt like I led the conversations a little bit too much. Like I did mention before, like I had all my questions written out. I tried to bring the conversation back into the line of question, and I think when you do that, there's so much that you're potentially leaving on the table in terms of good conversation. It's not that you're cutting people off mid conversation, but sometimes there are sometimes you could be in a conversation with somebody, they could be telling you a story, and it gets to that point where they stop talking, but you as the interviewer have the choice to ask them to expand on it a bit more by asking another question relative to what they are talking about, which is, a very enthralling story, or you can bring it on to your next line of question. Now, there are times when both are absolutely okay, but you need to keep an eye on your time, because if you don't want to over prepare for stuff, but you also don't want to have a ridiculously long episode that people are going to tune out of, because people's attention spans just simply aren't what they were. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having a podcast episode that's 90 minutes long, but knowing your audience is important to, knowing your audience, knowing how much of your show people are listening to. You have to kind of cater to that a little bit by managing your time. And sometimes if you are a little bit less prepared, or if you aren't over prepared, is probably the best way to put that. If you know where the conversation's going to go, and you are confident enough to steer it in a really natural and authentic way, then yeah, 100%. 100%. Because something I've learned with what I do personally for the type of podcast that I have, authenticity is so much better than structure. You may learn more about specific things about people in terms of what they do by having structured questions. But for me, I lean a little bit more on the side of wanting to get to know the person behind what they do. Because seeing what people do, hearing people's stories is fantastic, but for me, I'm more of a fan of hearing about how it shaped them as a person, what it was about these stories that they have, what did these people take away from it, how has it affected them going into later life. And sometimes you get more out of a person through just a sort of unstructured conversation than you do with an overstructured conversation. I've certainly learned that. I could name you a number of interviews I've had in the past, and even upcoming interviews from this point on, where I have not really had to talk much. I've just literally asked maybe one or two questions. The guest has just taken it away, and all of a sudden we're at time. And that to me is magic. That's when you know you have a good guest. There is an element, of course, where as the host, you need to sort of steer the ship a little bit, but you just also have to let the guest lead, because what you have to remember a lot of the time is, like, depending on who you have on your show, chances are they'll have guested on a lot more podcasts, and they will see all the different nuances in every single podcast that they go on. And the difference with that is you do your episodes the same sort of way, the same format. You keep on doing it again and again and again. The thing that changes is the guest. But when somebody's guested on a podcast, their story stays the same, for the most part anyway, but the podcast changes, which is a very, very significant difference, because I think that kind of trips guests up sometimes. I know when I guest, it trips me up, but there is just a massive, massive difference. But at the same time, there is that matter of being over prepared, but there is the matter of having the same sort of episode, same format, I should say. But consistency is important. I think you will be remembered as a podcaster for your consistency in terms of your format, in terms of how you treat your guests, in terms of your topics, in terms of just sticking to the theme of your show and putting out high quality content. That matters more than most things. And it brings me on to my next point. Consistency matters more than what gear you have in front of you, especially when you're starting out. So there's a thing called pod fade, where a lot of podcasts won't make it past a certain amount of episodes. Like most shows don't make it past 4, and even more don't make it past 10. Let alone get into triple digits, right? I believe it's only something like 6 to 6.5% of podcasts that make it into triple digits. But the only way you get there is through consistency. When I started out, my sound system was garbage. I didn't know what a mic filter was. I didn't know what a noise gate was. I did not know anything about noise compression or anything, the basic settings that you set up a microphone in to get that good quality that you hear on a lot of platforms. I just had no idea. So I was talking into this microphone, and you could tell, I think you could tell it was a cheap microphone, which again is not the worst thing in the world. You can make a cheap microphone sound very high quality if you put the right settings on it. But again, that's not the problem. You just need to keep showing up. You need to show up every single week. You need to market the absolute shit out of yourself consistently as well. It's actually quite interesting. I want to go back to one of my earlier episodes with a streamer called MC. And since she told me this, I've thought about it quite a lot, because it applies to all real forms of media and content creation. But if you put out any form of content, whether you're a streamer, whether you do a podcast or whatever it may be, your audience are going to treat it like a TV show. The better it is, the more people will tune in. The worse it is, the more people will tune out. And that's something that's honestly stuck with me for the better part of 1.5 years now, because it's so true. I've lived through that. I know a lot of others who've lived through that in different mediums, but consistency is a massive way to fight against that. Now, if you're putting out consistently bad content, then of course you need to figure out exactly where you're going wrong. But if you're consistently putting out there, you're consistently putting episodes out, you're consistently advertising it, marketing it, you will get the right eyes on it. And then once you become more established, you can then worry about the microphone that we use, the software you use. Because if you put that kind of investment into yourself first, and it turns out to not work out for you, then why did you put that investment in yourself in the first place? Why not just give it a go, knowing that you could have without all this expensive gear? I think you just give it a go. Give it a go. Let it stick. Decide if it's really what you want to do, and then put the investment into it. I mean, everybody has a choice, but I think if you're showing up right from the get go and you're showing up every time, that's what people are going to notice first. Like, people will notice, oh yeah, this person's doing a podcast every single week or every few days or whatever it may be. They're not going to be like, oh no, this guy's sound sucks or whatever it may be, or what does he use? As you get more established, of course, that will change. The more podcasters that you network with, that will change. You know, but you're consistent at the very beginning. That it really, really means absolutely everything. Now, I have always been consistent with the podcast. I feel like I could have been better, but I was about 2 months into the podcast and I went on my honeymoon and I had a 3-week gap with no episodes. And I don't think that early in, I don't think it was so damaging, but I think what I sort of realized way after the fact is I could have banked some episodes. I could have done extra recordings, banked them, and then have them uploaded for when I was on holiday, for when I was on my honeymoon. But I didn't even think to do that. You know, and when it comes to consistency, it's not necessarily a matter of having interviews or having episodes recorded on particular days. Look, if that works with your schedule, then of course, by all means. But if you are releasing, like, for example, similar to what I do, an interview podcast every week, it is more than okay to have multiple recordings in a day, multiple recordings in a week, or whatever it may be. You can get, like, if you do it once a week, you can easily get months and months worth of episodes in a couple of weeks. If you do one recording a day, say Monday to Friday for 2 weeks, 10 episodes. That is 10 weeks of episodes you've got for 10 days, for 10 hours. Then of course you add in that. You know, what people see as a podcaster, what people see is the end result. They don't see, nor do they really care, what goes into it. If you put out an episode on one particular Sunday, nobody's going to be like, when was this recorded? No one cares. All they care about is seeing the end result come out when they are fully expecting it. And that's something I think is one of the earliest things as a podcaster that you have to get nailed down. Really is one of the earliest things, because then people will just know to take you seriously. And of course, with being taken seriously, I've mentioned this before, but you will be finding your voice from the start. You'll be finding your voice, but your voice is always going to change. Your voice will never, your voice at episode 100 will not be the same as it was at episode 1 or 25 or 50. Your voice is always going to change. Like in my own personal circumstance, I went from streamer to a podcaster, which there are some similarities, but there are a lot of differences as well. And I kind of think whenever I was a streamer, I got used to talking to people who were replying to me in text form. And you can still have a conversation like that, but it's strange when you break it down. It's very, very strange when you break it down. Then I became a podcaster and I started having conversations with people I had known from watching as streamers or from having minor conversations with, to actually speaking to them properly for the first time remotely. And then you kind of realize it's like, oh wow, like, I mean, this is very, very different. This is like no way how I would talk to like my live chat or anything like that. And then again, this fully depends on who you're interviewing. Like for me, it was always like-minded people. As a streamer, I was interviewing other streamers. You talk to people like a streamer. Then whenever I went to speak to other people, like the likes of authors, TV executives, actors, musicians, whatever, you have to, you kind of have to talk to them as an interviewer. And as an interviewer who has done their research and knows what they're talking about. That's where you kind of really find your voice, is when you can stay, to sort of go back to the previous point as well, when you can stay consistent, but keeping your voice, no matter what the variety of your guest is on your show. And I kind of feel like I've done this, but it was honestly, I feel like I kind of had to almost improvise with it a little bit, because I've never been an interviewer before. Before I did this podcast, I was not an interviewer. This is the first instance of me ever interviewing as a person. And it took a lot of improvising, to be quite honest with you. Like, I mean, I grew up watching talk shows as a kid. I loved talk shows as a kid. But this is nowhere near anything like a talk show in terms of like what you see when you watch a talk show at the weekend. Like, and that's because you are using your own voice. You're finding your own voice. You're never going to be successfully emulating another person's voice or another person's style of interview. You're always going to have your own. And you'll find that you'll get more confident in yourself and how you're speaking, and everything will just come to you more naturally. And even to the point, like in certain circumstances like this, I can still count on one hand how many solo podcast episodes I've done, and I feel comfortable doing that. I feel comfortable doing it. I know I'm not having a conversation. I know this is just me talking, and whoever's listening is listening. Thank you. But because I feel like I know from my own experiences what I'm talking about, that I have this kind of confidence in able to do this. Now, again, I am solely speaking from my own personal experience, and I hope that it resonates with whoever's listening, whoever might be in a situation where they're early into podcasting, or maybe they're reflecting on things, or they want to get into podcasting. That's the whole point of what I'm doing right now. But and I said that there was a lot of improvising in terms of me all of a sudden becoming this interviewer with no prior experience and no practice. You just have to go with your gut on it. Because I did it live, I think I had that real advantage, because I did it live, and it was very much a case of, okay, I'm used to doing this. I used to do this live. I'm used to having chat, talking. The only thing is different is I actually have another person speaking back to me. But because I have a live audience, I want to do this in one take. And I had to talk myself up a lot. Like, I had to talk myself up a lot. And I feel like, I don't want to say I found my voice quite early, but I definitely, there was certain elements of my voice that I found really early. Like certain elements of it. And that was really kind of just being able to just listen to people, take bits of the conversation, and like, right, let's talk about this here, and even today, like, I mean, it's, I think sometimes you kind of have to adapt your voice to whoever your guest is, because you will have guests that will completely carry a conversation. Not that you struggle to, but they will just carry it because it's just the type of storyteller they are. But then you'll have other guests where you have to really drag a lot out of them. And then in that, your voice has to change a little bit. You have to really think on your feet. You have to go with your gut. You have to keep an eye on the time. And, do you think, okay, do I continue to drag this on, or do I just call it here? And you have to really keep an eye on everything as you're doing it, whilst keeping your voice. That's challenging for sure. It is so challenging, but it's something I think, like anything, with practice, with consistency, you do just you figure it out. Like you figure it out. It's one of those things that it just comes to you. You just kind of know and can get an idea of the type of conversation you're about to have, and just go from there. So the last point that I want to bring up is your community is everything. Your audience is everything. The people in your network, they are everything. So I talk about this in some detail in my book. I actually have a full chapter on the power of networking. So if you haven't checked out the book, then I would love it if you did check out the book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, available on Amazon. I would absolutely love it. Details the lessons that I've learned over really the first 100 conversations that I had as a podcaster. But this is one of the most important things that I learned as a podcaster. And it's one of those things that I was actually doing from day dot, but I never really considered it to be that way, or nor did I really acknowledge it, to be honest with you. But yeah, networking, your community, absolutely everything. Whenever I signed up to Podmatch in, I think it was February 2025, I saw the sheer number of podcasts, the sheer number of people who were seasoned podcast guests or hosts. It was like, oh my God. And that for me was like, okay, it opened my eyes for sure. But for me, the reason, one of the reasons it was so eye-opening was because this was essentially the start of me creating a new network outside of what my current or previous network really was. So, and I mentioned before, I didn't really acknowledge the whole thing of it before, but whenever I was a streamer, every time I collaborated with somebody, every time I spoke to somebody, every time I got to know somebody, went into their stream, everything like that, that was me building my network. And it's one of them things, maybe I knew it and just didn't really know what kind of label to put on it, but yeah, I've been networking the entire time. But I guess I just didn't consider it to be a network. I didn't consider, because I never knew I was going to do the podcast. And of course, because I knew these people, they were always going to be the first people that I asked. So yeah, I leveraged my network right from the very beginning. Did I consider it that way? Absolutely not. No. For me, it was a case of, this is me bringing my community as a streamer, and I want to try and integrate it with other people's communities and vice versa. That's kind of why I did it live on Twitch. But that was the part of the reason, like, why, and they were sort of a lot more accessible and attainable because I knew them. So yeah, like literally I was utilizing my network, but I never considered it that way, just because I guess of sheer ignorance, really. But then whenever I joined Podmatch, like, it opened so many doors. And even before that, I actually took to Reddit to check out what the podcasting scene in Reddit was like, and it's pretty hefty there too. And I got a few guests on from Reddit. I went on a couple of podcasts, and not only did I learn about a lot about myself as a guest on a podcast, but also I had people guest on the show who I still speak to today. Do my original core audience, who are in like my Discord server or who have been there since day one, do they know these people? No, they don't. This is a completely separate network that I have with different people. Your network is never necessarily always going to be a big web of people, all who know each other, all who are in the same place. Never going to be that. That's not necessarily how communities work. Now, of course, you can leverage that. You can have Facebook groups. You can have like free to join things like a Discord server, for example. But again, not everybody is gonna really kind of take up on that, and that's fine. Nor should they. People can do what they want to do. But yeah, I still have people, and every so often, I'll reach out to people who I had on the show some months ago to a year ago, particularly a year ago, to be like, oh my God, it's been a year. Hope you're doing well, this, that, and the other. Just to keep that network open. Just to really, be like, look, we recorded a great podcast together. Let's not let this be the end. Let's, if you ever want to come back on the show or ever need anything, reach out to me. And, you'd kind of hope that it would be a two-way kind of thing. But, your community is absolutely everything. And, like I just mentioned, like as soon as you have them on your show and your episode releases, you share the links. That doesn't have to be the end of it. I personally, if when previous guests reach out to me, I love it. Absolutely love it. My DMs are always open. Whether you're a previous guest or if you want to connect, and you're like-minded, you have the right attitude towards podcasting 100%. Because if you don't have those eyes on your show, then how do you really expect to kind of learn anything from what you're doing? You can just sit and do it, enjoy it, not really care about the metrics, and that's totally fine. That is totally fine. But what you will find is the community that you build, and this is like through your listeners, your guests, and anybody else who's like involved in your journey in some way. This will shape the show for you. And again, I mean, I say that it's such a broad term because, for example, right, if you're that clued in with your listeners, you know exactly who your listeners are, and they like a certain type of episode more than others. Do you go with what the audience think like that? And it's I mean, that's a whole other conversation altogether. But I mean, you also do. It is important to really understand your community and what it is that they are, what they like, the things that they want to see, the things that they want to hear, and the things that they enjoy. But as a whole, though, podcasting is just one big network. Let's say you interview somebody, you send them the links once it's uploaded, they share it with their community. You might get another listener or two, you might not. But regardless, your show's name is the net has been cast even further because of that little bit of networking. Even if it is a guest sharing a link to their whatever page it may be that they use, your show's out there, and your show's out there somewhere that you might not have been able to get it to before. And whether it bears any fruit is a whole other thing altogether, but you never really know. You never really know. Not a lot of these things aren't necessarily instant. I mean, I still get emails to this day with people who are like, "Oh my God, your episode 43 was incredible," and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, those types of emails are another conversation altogether. But yeah, listen to your community is really kind of, but don't let them take over the show. Your show is yours. You have to be the one to learn from it, make the informed decisions, and just be happy. Just enjoy what it is you're doing. So let's before we wrap up here, let's recap on what we have talked about today. So first of all, you don't need everything figured out. You will figure things out as you go along. And will you ever have everything figured out? Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe. But from the get-go, you don't need everything figured out. Conversations are better when you stop over-preparing. 100%. Just let conversations flow. Let them be more authentic. Let your guest be their authentic self and not limited to the questions that are asked. So just have a few things prepared, but not everything, not too much. Consistency matters more than gear. Well, what actually matters is showing up. If you show up and if you can put yourself in a position to be taken seriously by other podcasters, other listeners, and other whoever may be in your immediate community, that is an amazing place to start out. Then once things start to pick up, once you gain your confidence, once you start to grow a bit, then you can invest in some gear. Then you can invest in the microphones. You can invest in the software. When you know you have something, you know you've got that confidence to just push on through, to really make something of it. Your voice will change. And that is an amazing thing. Your voice will change. You will become more confident in the way you speak. The way you speak will become more natural. You will learn to make decisions on the fly, to trust your instincts, it'll become like a second language to you. You'll be recording. You won't even be thinking about these things consciously. You will just do it. And you will absolutely love it. The absolute burst of confidence and adrenaline that you get after a great episode, knowing that you put in a very good conversation. It's incredible. And then, of course, community is everything. We are not who we are without the people who listen to our shows. They are a huge, huge part of our journeys, of our shows. They really do help us become as good as we can be. And that's important, whether you're a listener or a guest or whatever it may be. If you're a part of the journey, you have shaped whatever show in some way, shape, or form. And that's something that should always be fondly remembered. And just, always be aware that you need the people around you to really kind of help be the best you can. But this has been things I wish I knew before starting my podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you all. Much love. And there you have it for episode 103 of Behind the Camera. Thank you for tuning in to this midweek edition of Behind the Camera. I hope this and all future topics discussed you find helpful, interesting, or at the very least, a good listen. As always, thank you to all patrons for your support. You're all truly appreciated. And of course, if you would like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, check out my Linktree in the description for all socials and my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, which is out now. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.